The certified letter from the Meadowbrook Hills Homeowners Association arrived on a Tuesday morning, and I knew before opening it that my life was about to get complicated. My name is Yuri Denton, and I had been living in my modest two-story home in suburban Phoenix, Arizona, for exactly 8 months when the HOA decided that my natural gas meter was somehow offensive to the aesthetic sensibilities of the neighborhood. The letter, signed by someone named Patricia Wilkins, president of the Meadowbrook Hills HOA, stated in no uncertain terms that my gas meter was too exposed and violated Section 12.7 of the community bylaws regarding external utility fixtures and their appropriate concealment. I stood in my driveway, staring at the beige metal box attached to the side of my house. It was a standard natural gas meter, identical to the ones on every other house in the neighborhood. The utility company had installed it there when the house was built in 2019, and it had been sitting in that exact spot through 2 previous owners before I bought the place last year. But apparently, Patricia Wilkins had decided that now, in March of 2025, it was suddenly a problem. The letter gave me 30 days to remedy the situation or face daily fines of $50. I called my neighbor, an elderly man named Gerald who had lived in Meadowbrook Hills since the development was first built 15 years ago. "Oh, Patricia," Gerald said with a heavy sigh when I asked him about her. "Yeah, she got elected president about 6 months ago. Things have been different since then. She fined the Johnsons for having the wrong shade of white on their mailbox post. The Martinses got hit with violations because their rose bushes were blooming too enthusiastically and extending 6 inches past their property line into the common area." I rubbed my temples. "Gerald, my gas meter has been there for 6 years. Every house has one in roughly the same spot." "Yours is on the front-facing side of your house," Gerald explained. "Most of them are on the side or back. When she drives into the neighborhood, yours is one of the first she sees. Patricia drives a white Lexus SUV, and she does a patrol every single morning at 7. You are kidding me." I wish I was. "Look, Yuri, my advice. Just build something around it, a little box or a screen. Keep the peace. She has a majority on the board right now, and they will back her up on everything." I thanked Gerald and went back inside. My girlfriend, Zara Rivera, was in the kitchen making coffee. We had been together for 2 years, and she had moved in with me 3 months ago. When I showed her the letter, her dark eyes flashed with anger. "This is absurd," she said. "The gas meter was there when you bought the house. If it violated their precious bylaws, the previous owners would have been notified." "That's what I thought too," I said. "But Gerald says the new HOA president is on some kind of power trip." Zara pulled out her laptop. She worked as a paralegal for a law firm downtown, and she had a natural instinct for finding loopholes and inconsistencies in legal documents. For the next hour, she pored over the HOA bylaws that had been included in my closing documents. "Here," she said finally, pointing at her screen. "Section 12.7 says that external utility fixtures should be reasonably concealed when visible from primary street views. But look at Section 3.2. It says that any structure or modification to the exterior of a home requires written approval from the HOA board before construction begins. And Section 3.4 says that the board has to respond to such requests within 15 business days. So what are you saying?" "I'm saying that you should build something to cover the meter, but you need to submit plans and get approval first. That way, if they reject your plans, you have documentation that you tried to comply but they made it impossible. And if they approve your plans, you are protected from any future complaints about whatever you build." It made sense. I spent the rest of the day researching gas meter enclosures online and sketching out a simple design. The box would be made of wood, painted to match my house's exterior trim. It would have a hinged door for meter reader access, with ventilation slats to prevent gas buildup. The whole thing would be maybe 2 feet wide, 3 feet tall, and a foot deep. Simple, functional, and in my opinion, actually an improvement over the bare meter. On Wednesday, I drafted a formal letter to the HOA board, including detailed drawings of my proposed gas meter enclosure. I specified the dimensions, materials, and colors. I noted that the design would allow full access for utility company personnel and included proper ventilation for safety. I printed 3 copies, signed them all, and hand-delivered one to the HOA management office in the strip mall on the edge of our development. The woman behind the desk, whose nameplate identified her as Sharon, barely looked up from her computer. "Just leave it in the inbox," she said, gesturing to a metal tray overflowing with papers. "I need to make sure this gets logged as received," I said. "Can you stamp it with today's date?" Sharon looked annoyed but pulled out a date stamp and pressed it onto my copy with more force than necessary. "Anything else? When can I expect a response? The board meets the first Monday of each month. If they get to your request, you will get a letter. The bylaws say you have to respond within 15 business days." Sharon's eyes narrowed. "The board will respond when they respond." "Is there anything else?" I left, already knowing this was going to be more difficult than it needed to be. Zara suggested I also email a copy of my request to create a digital paper trail, so I found the HOA's general contact email on their website and sent a PDF of my entire proposal. Days passed. I heard nothing. I sent a follow-up email after a week. No response. I called the HOA office and was told that Patricia Wilkins was very busy and would get to it eventually. On day 14, with 1 business day left before they violated their own bylaws, I received an email. Not from Patricia Wilkins, but from a board member named Deborah Chen. The email was brief. "Your request has been received and will be discussed at the April 7th board meeting. You will be notified of the decision afterward." April 7th was 3 weeks away. My 30-day deadline from the original violation letter was April 2nd. I responded immediately, pointing out this discrepancy. Deborah Chen's reply came an hour later. "The violation deadline is separate from the architectural approval process. You should have submitted your plans earlier." I read the email 3 times, each time feeling my blood pressure rise. Zara, reading over my shoulder, put a hand on my arm. "This is deliberate," she said. "They are setting you up to fail either way. If you build without approval, you are in violation of Section 3.2. If you wait for approval, you are in violation of the original notice. Either way, they get to fine you. That cannot be legal." "It probably isn't," Zara agreed, "but fighting it will cost time and money. They are counting on you just giving up or giving in." I was not the type to give up. On March 28th, I sent a certified letter to the HOA board. Return receipt requested, explaining the Catch-22 situation they had created and requesting an extension of the violation deadline until they had processed my architectural approval request. I cited the specific bylaw sections and noted that it would be unreasonable to expect a homeowner to violate one rule in order to comply with another. The certified letter was received and signed for by Sharon at the HOA office on March 30th. I received no response. April 2nd came and went. On April 4th, I received another certified letter. This one informed me that I was now being fined $50 per day for failure to remedy the gas meter violation. The letter was dated April 2nd, meaning I already owed $150, Zara was furious. "This is harassment. They are clearly targeting you." I called a lawyer that afternoon. His name was Robert Fitzgerald, and he specialized in HOA disputes. His office was in Scottsdale, and he agreed to meet with me the next morning. Robert Fitzgerald was in his 50s, with gray hair and a weathered face that suggested he had been fighting HOA battles for a long time. He listened to my story, reviewed my documentation, and nodded slowly. "You have done everything right," he said. "You have documented every communication, you have tried to follow their procedures, and you have pointed out the contradictions in their requirements. The problem is that fighting this properly will cost you more in legal fees than the fines, at least in the short term. What do you suggest?" "Honestly, build the box. Don't wait for their approval. When they inevitably fine you for building without approval, we will have an even stronger case that their system is designed to be impossible to comply with. We can take it to court, show a pattern of arbitrary and capricious enforcement, and potentially get the entire board removed and your legal fees reimbursed. And if we lose, then you will have a nice box around your gas meter and you will owe some legal fees. But I don't think we will lose." I have dealt with Patricia Wilkins before. She was on a different HOA board in Chandler a few years ago. They had to settle a lawsuit after she tried to foreclose on a homeowner for having the wrong color garden hose. I went home and discussed it with Zara. We decided to move forward. That weekend, I went to Home Depot and bought lumber, screws, hinges, paint, and all the other supplies I would need. The total came to about $200. Sunday morning, I started building. Gerald came over to watch and offer occasional advice. A few other neighbors stopped by, curious about what I was doing. Most of them were sympathetic. Everyone had a Patricia Wilkins story. The Hendersons had been fined for parking their car on the street overnight when their garage door opener broke. The Patel family had been cited for their kids' basketball hoop being 2 inches over the property line. The Richardsons were in a dispute because their dog had barked at a squirrel at 6 in the morning, violating the quiet hours provision. "Why doesn't anyone run against her?" I asked. Gerald shook his head. "She has a voting bloc. Her friends Deborah Chen and Linda Martinez are on the board, and they vote as a unit. The other 2 board members, Frank Thompson and Michael Ortega, try to be reasonable, but they are outvoted 3-2 on everything. Elections are in November. A lot of us are hoping to change things then, but that is 7 months away." By Sunday evening, my gas meter enclosure was complete. It looked good, professional even. The wood was smooth and painted a crisp white to match my trim. The door opened easily and latched securely. The ventilation slats were evenly spaced. Any reasonable person would have approved it. I took photos from multiple angles and sent them to Robert Fitzgerald. He responded, "Looks great. Now we wait for them to notice." They noticed on Monday morning. I know this because Gerald texted me at 7:15. "Patricia just drove past your house twice. Second time she stopped and took pictures." The certified letter arrived on Wednesday. I was in violation of Section 3.2 for constructing an exterior modification without board approval. The fine was $100 per day, backdated to Sunday when I had started building. I now owed $300 for the construction violation, plus the ongoing $50 per day for the original gas meter violation, which apparently was still in effect even though I had concealed the meter. "They are saying the meter is still too exposed," I said to Zara, reading the letter aloud, "because the enclosure I built is itself visible and draws attention to the location of the meter. That makes no sense whatsoever. None of this makes sense." I forwarded everything to Robert Fitzgerald. He said he would draft a response and start preparing a lawsuit. In the meantime, the fines kept accumulating. $50 per day for the meter, $100 per day for the box, $150 per day, every day. By the end of April, I theoretically owed over $4,000. I say theoretically because I had no intention of paying a single cent until this was resolved properly. The HOA sent increasingly aggressive letters, each one adding late fees and threatening to place a lien on my property. The April 7th board meeting came and went. I attended, sitting in the back of the community center room along with about a dozen other homeowners who had various disputes. Patricia Wilkins sat at the center of the long table at the front, flanked by Deborah Chen and Linda Martinez. Frank Thompson and Michael Ortega sat at the ends, looking uncomfortable. When it was time to discuss my architectural approval request for the gas meter enclosure, Patricia did not even look at me. "Request denied," she said. "The proposed structure does not meet aesthetic standards for the community. Next item." "Wait," I said, standing up. "What aesthetic standards? I followed all the guidelines in the bylaws." Patricia fixed me with a cold stare. "The board has the discretion to deny any request that does not align with the community's visual standards. Your appeal is noted. Next item." "I haven't made an appeal yet." "Then you can submit one in writing." Next item. Robert Fitzgerald had warned me not to argue at the meeting. "Let them be unreasonable on the record," he had said. "It helps our case." So I sat down and let them move on. After the meeting, Frank Thompson approached me in the parking lot. He was a stocky man in his 60s who looked genuinely distressed. "I voted to approve your request," he said quietly. "Michael did too, but we are outvoted every time. I am sorry. This is not what HOA boards are supposed to do." "Why do you stay on the board if you disagree with everything?" "Because if Michael and I resign, Patricia gets to appoint replacements. She would pick 2 more people like her, and it would be even worse. At least this way we can occasionally stop the most extreme things." I appreciated his honesty, but it did not solve my problem. Robert filed the lawsuit in Maricopa County Superior Court on April 15th. We were suing the HOA for selective enforcement, arbitrary and capricious decision-making, and violating their own bylaws. We requested that all fines be rescinded, that my gas meter enclosure be officially approved, and that I be reimbursed for legal fees. The HOA responded by increasing my fines. A new letter arrived claiming that my lawsuit itself was a violation of Section 18.3, which required homeowners to attempt mediation before pursuing litigation. Never mind that Section 18.3 also said mediation had to be offered by the board, and they had never offered it. The new fine was $250 per day for frivolous litigation. "They are digging themselves deeper," Robert said when I called him, panicked about the rapidly accumulating total. "Let them. Every ridiculous fine makes our case stronger." In May, things escalated. Patricia Wilkins began showing up at my house personally. The first time, she arrived at 6:30 in the morning, pounding on my door. I was still in my pajamas when I answered. "You need to remove that structure immediately," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. She was a thin woman in her late 40s, with blonde hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her face. She wore a white pantsuit and held a leather portfolio like a weapon. "Good morning to you too," I said. "There is an active lawsuit. You should be communicating through your lawyer." "I am the president of this HOA, and I have every right to inspect properties for violations. You have the right to view my property from public areas. You do not have the right to show up on my doorstep at dawn. If you do not remove that box, I will have it removed for you and bill you for the cost. That would be destruction of property. I would call the police." Patricia's face reddened. You think you are clever, don't you? You think you can just ignore the rules everyone else follows. I have followed every rule. You are the one making up new ones as you go. She jabbed a finger toward me. I have dealt with people like you before. You will lose. They always lose. She turned and stalked back to her white Lexus. I closed the door and found Zara standing in the hallway, recording the entire conversation on her phone. I started recording when I heard the shouting, she said. That felt like it might be useful. It was. Robert Fitzgerald loved it. Personal harassment, threats, it is all here. This woman is out of control. Patricia came back 3 more times over the next 2 weeks. Each time, Zara or I recorded the interaction. Each time, Patricia became more aggressive. She threatened to have my car towed for being improperly parked in my own driveway. She claimed my lawn was a 1/4 inch too tall and promised massive fines. She said our outdoor light fixtures were creating light pollution and disturbing the neighbors, even though we had never received a single complaint. Other neighbors started reaching out to me. The Hendersons, the Patels, the Richardsons, and half a dozen others. They all had similar stories of Patricia's harassment. Some had been fighting her for months. Others had simply paid the fines to make it stop, even when they knew they were in the right. "We should organize," said Jennifer Henderson one evening. She had invited everyone to her house for an impromptu meeting. 16 people showed up. "If we are all facing the same problems, maybe we can tackle this together." A man named Thomas Rivera, no relation to Zara, despite the same last name, stood up. He was a lawyer himself, though he practiced family law, not HOA disputes. "I have been documenting everything too. I think we have grounds for a class action lawsuit. Or at the very least, we have enough people to force a recall election." According to the bylaws, a recall election required signatures from 30% of homeowners. Meadowbrook Hills had 212 homes. We needed 64 signatures. By the end of the meeting, we had 16. We decided to canvass the neighborhood over the next few weeks. Patricia must have heard about our organizing, because things got worse. In early June, I received a notice that the HOA was placing a lien on my property for unpaid fines, which now totaled over $15,000 by their math. Robert immediately filed an emergency motion to block the lien, arguing that the underlying fines were disputed and the subject of active litigation. The judge, a stern woman named Carolyn Vasquez, scheduled a hearing for June 12th. Both sides presented their arguments. Robert brought our entire file of documentation. My initial approval request, the HOA's contradictory responses, the escalating fines, the videos of Patricia's harassment, everything. The HOA's lawyer, a nervous young man who looked like he was regretting taking this case, argued that the HOA had broad discretion in enforcement matters. Judge Vasquez was not impressed. "Counsel, your client denied this man's architectural approval request, but he submitted it before the violation deadline. Then they fined him for not completing the work before they had processed his request. That seems problematic. The homeowner could have built a temporary solution while awaiting approval," the lawyer argued weakly. "And would that temporary solution have required approval?" "Well, yes, technically. So he would have been fined either way. The homeowner should have had the meter concealed before purchasing the property." Judge Vasquez removed her glasses and fixed the lawyer with a look that could melt steel. "The gas meter was installed by the utility company when the house was built. It was there through 2 previous owners. Your client only decided it was a problem 8 months after this homeowner purchased the property. I am granting the emergency motion. No lien will be placed on the property until this case is resolved. Furthermore, all fines are suspended pending trial. We are going to have a full hearing on this matter, and the HOA board better be prepared to explain their decision-making process in detail. The trial was scheduled for August 18th. In the meantime, our recall petition was gaining momentum. We had 93 signatures by mid-June, well over the required threshold. Thomas Rivera drafted the recall paperwork, and we submitted it to the HOA management company. Patricia went ballistic. She called an emergency board meeting and declared the recall petition invalid due to improper formatting. Thomas, being a lawyer, had made sure the formatting was perfect. We threatened another lawsuit. The management company, clearly tired of the drama, validated the petition over Patricia's objections. The recall election was scheduled for July 20th. Patricia, Deborah Chen, and Linda Martinez would all face recall votes. If a majority of homeowners voted to remove them, new elections would be held within 30 days. Patricia campaigned hard. She sent letters to every homeowner warning of the dangerous precedent of removing elected board members. She held a town hall where she claimed that the recall was being organized by troublemakers who wanted to turn Meadowbrook Hills into a lawless neighborhood with no standards. She showed photos of a property in a different state where an HOA had dissolved, and property values had supposedly plummeted. Our group countered with facts. We held our own town halls. We shared stories of Patricia's overreach and harassment. We pointed out that we were not against HOAs in general, just against boards that abused their power. We wanted reasonable enforcement of reasonable rules, nothing more. Zara designed a simple flyer that we distributed. Vote YES on recall. Restore common sense to Meadowbrook Hills. It included testimonials from multiple homeowners and before and after photos of my gas meter enclosure, which looked perfectly fine and in no way harmed the neighborhood's appearance. The day of the recall election arrived. Voting was held at the community center from 8 in the morning until 8 at night. Turnout was high. By the time the polls closed, over 70% of homeowners had cast ballots. The votes were counted by the management company staff under the supervision of an independent observer. The results were announced at 9:30. Patricia Wilkins, recalled, 127 votes in favor, 58 against. Deborah Chen, recalled, 114 votes in favor, 71 against. Linda Martinez, recalled, 109 votes in favor, 76 against. The community center erupted in cheers. Patricia stood frozen at the front of the room, her face pale. Deborah and Linda gathered their things quickly and left. Patricia stayed, staring at the results posted on the screen. Finally, she turned to face the room. "You have all made a terrible mistake," she said, her voice shaking. "This neighborhood will fall apart without proper leadership." "We just voted for proper leadership," someone called out. "And it's not you." Patricia left. I never saw her at another HOA function again. The special election for new board members was held on August 15th, 3 days before my scheduled trial. Frank Thompson and Michael Ortega stayed on the board. 3 new members were elected: Jennifer Henderson, Thomas Rivera, and a retired engineer named Susan Walsh. The 5 of them held their first meeting on August 16th. The first order of business was my gas meter enclosure. Thomas motioned to grant retroactive approval. Frank seconded. The vote was unanimous. The second order of business was rescinding all fines issued during Patricia's tenure that had been disputed by homeowners. Again, unanimous. The third order of business was establishing new procedures to prevent future abuse. This included requiring a 2/3 board majority for any fines over $100, mandatory mediation before legal action, and a homeowner appeals process with time limits for board responses. When I went to court on August 18th, Robert presented the new board's actions to Judge Vasquez. The HOA's lawyer, a different one this time, stipulated to dismissing the case with prejudice. The judge made it official with one tap of her gavel. "Mr. Denton," she said, "I am glad to see this resolved. HOAs serve an important function, but they must act reasonably and consistently. I hope your new board understands that." "I believe they do, Your Honor." Outside the courthouse, Robert shook my hand. "That was one of the most satisfying cases I have ever worked. Usually these things drag on for years." "What about your fees?" "Already worked out with the new board. They are paying your legal costs as part of the settlement. They are also requiring Patricia Wilkins to personally reimburse the HOA for the legal fees they incurred defending her actions." I went home and found Zara waiting with champagne. We celebrated on our back patio, watching the Arizona sunset paint the sky orange and purple. "You know what is funny?" I said. "The whole thing was about a gas meter, a completely ordinary, functional gas meter that every house has." "It was never about the gas meter," Zara said. "It was about control. Some people get a little power and they lose their minds." Over the next few weeks, life in Meadowbrook Hills returned to normal. The new board was responsive and reasonable. When the Johnsons wanted to repaint their mailbox, they got approval in 3 days. When the Patel kids' basketball hoop needed to be moved slightly, the board worked with them to find a compliant location instead of just issuing fines. In September, I saw Patricia Wilkins one last time. I was at the grocery store, and she was in the checkout line ahead of me. She looked smaller somehow, less certain. When she saw me, she quickly looked away and hurried out without saying a word. I did not feel triumphant. I just felt tired. The whole ordeal had taken 6 months of my life, caused enormous stress, and cost money even with the reimbursement. And for what? So a power-hungry HOA president could prove a point that did not need proving. But then I got home and looked at my gas meter enclosure, painted white and neat against the side of my house, and I felt a small sense of satisfaction. It was a good box. It did exactly what it was supposed to do. And I had built it despite someone trying their hardest to make it impossible. That night, Gerald came over for a barbecue. He had lived through the entire saga and had become a good friend. As we grilled steaks and talked about nothing in particular, he raised his beer. "To standing up to unreasonable people," he said. "To reasonable people standing up," I countered. We clinked bottles and drank. The following months were peaceful. The new HOA board operated smoothly. Disputes were handled fairly. The neighborhood felt friendlier, like a weight had been lifted. People waved when they drove past. Kids played in yards without parents worrying about noise complaints. In November, I received a letter from the Arizona Attorney General's office. Apparently, someone had filed a formal complaint about Patricia Wilkins' actions as HOA president, alleging fraud and misuse of HOA funds. The investigation had discovered that Patricia had been paying herself an unauthorized salary from HOA dues, claiming it was administrative compensation, even though the bylaws explicitly stated board positions were volunteer. The amounts were not huge, maybe $15,000 over her 8-month tenure, but it was still theft. The letter informed me that I might be called as a witness if charges were filed. In December, Patricia Wilkins was charged with theft and fraud. The case made the local news. I was not called to testify because she took a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to 1 count of theft and 1 count of fraud, receiving probation, community service, and an order to make full restitution to the HOA. Zara and I watched the news coverage together. "You feel vindicated?" she asked. I feel like justice was done, I said. That's different. As 2025 drew to a close, I reflected on the whole experience. I had bought a house hoping for a quiet life in a nice neighborhood. Instead, I had gotten embroiled in an HOA war over a gas meter. I had spent thousands of dollars on lawyers, countless hours documenting everything, and untold emotional energy fighting someone who should have never had the power they abused. But I had also learned something valuable. Communities matter. Neighbors matter. When people come together and refuse to be bullied, they can make real change. Our little group of frustrated homeowners had not just resolved my problem, we had fixed a systemic issue that was affecting dozens of families. The new year came. Life went on. My gas meter stayed safely enclosed in its white wooden box, and nobody ever complained about it again. The box withstood monsoon rains, summer heat, and the occasional curious lizard. It was exactly what it needed to be: functional, attractive, and completely unremarkable. Sometimes I would walk past it and remember the absurdity of the whole situation. A gas meter, an HOA president on a power trip, a 6-month battle that never should have happened. But then I would remember Gerald's toast about standing up to unreasonable people, and I would feel okay about it all. In February of 2026, the HOA held its annual meeting. The new board presented a budget that was balanced and reasonable. They reported that deed compliance was high and enforcement actions were down 70% from the previous year, not because rules were being ignored, but because reasonable people were following reasonable rules without drama. Jennifer Henderson, now the board president, gave a short speech. HOAs exist to protect property values and maintain community standards, she said. But they should do so with common sense and respect for homeowners. We are all neighbors first. Rules should serve the community, not the other way around. There was applause. Real, genuine applause from people who felt like they finally had a board that represented them properly. After the meeting, several people thanked me for standing up to Patricia. I deflected the credit. It was all of us, I said. No one person could have changed things. But privately, I knew that someone had to be first. Someone had to refuse to back down, to document everything, to fight the good fight even when it seemed pointless. This time, that someone had been me. A few weeks later, I was doing yard work when a young couple walked past with a real estate agent, clearly house hunting in our neighborhood. They stopped to look at a for sale sign a few doors down. "What's the HOA like here?" the woman asked me. I smiled. "It's reasonable," I said. "They handle things fairly, communicate clearly, and don't bother you about stupid stuff. You know how it should be." "That's good to hear," the man said. "We almost bought in a different neighborhood, but the reviews of their HOA were terrible." They moved on, and I went back to trimming my hedges. My phone buzzed with a text from Zara. "Bringing home Thai food for dinner. Love you." I texted back a heart emoji and looked around at my neighborhood. The Hendersons were washing their car. The Patel kids were playing basketball. Gerald was checking his mail. Everything was ordinary, peaceful, and exactly as it should be. The gas meter box sat against my house, weathered slightly but still solid, a monument to the most ridiculous fight I had ever won. I had built it to solve a problem that should not have existed, fought a battle that should not have been necessary, and in the process helped restore sanity to a community that had temporarily lost its way. As I gathered up the yard waste and wheeled the bin to the curb, I thought about all the people in all the neighborhoods across America dealing with their own Patricia Wilkins figures, their own petty tyrants armed with bylaws and fines. I hoped they would stand up too. I hoped they would document everything, organize their neighbors, and fight for common sense, Because HOAs do not have to be nightmares. They can be exactly what they were meant to be: organizations that genuinely serve their communities. But that only happens when good people refuse to let bad actors run the show. The sun was setting, painting the Arizona sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Zara's car pulled into the driveway, and the smell of Thai food drifted out when she opened the door. Gerald waved from across the street. The Patel kids' basketball bounced rhythmically against the pavement. Everything was as it should be. The gas meter was properly enclosed. The HOA was properly functioning. Justice had been properly served, and in the end, that was all I had ever wanted. Not victory, not vindication, just a reasonable response to a reasonable problem. It had taken longer than it should have and cost more than it needed to, but we had gotten there. I grabbed the Thai food from Zara, kissed her cheek, and headed inside to eat dinner in my home in my neighborhood, where a simple white wooden box around a natural gas meter represented so much more than just a way to hide utility equipment. It represented the principle that homeowners have rights, that rules should be fair, and that ordinary people can successfully challenge those who abuse power. It represented 6 months of frustration transformed into permanent change. It represented a community that found its voice and used it. And every time I looked at that box, I would remember all of it: the certified letters, the accumulated fines, the courtroom drama, the recall election, and ultimately, the return to sanity. My name is Yuri Denton. I live in Meadowbrook Hills in suburban Phoenix, Arizona. And this is the story of how my HOA said my natural gas meter was too exposed, so I built a box around it, and in doing so, helped take down a corrupt board and restore common sense to an entire neighborhood. It was not the story I expected when I opened that first certified letter on a Tuesday morning, but it is the story I got, and I would not change it. Because some fights are worth fighting, even over something as mundane as a gas meter, especially over something as mundane as a gas meter.